You are listening to the story The Bloodline revealed on the Velvet Audio Stories channel. Breaking your
I spent 5 years tearing this world apart just to find a ghost. And now, here you are, standing in my office. With that innocent face, and 2 children carrying my own eyes. You're mistaken, Dominic. I didn't come back to beg. I'm here to claim what belongs to my children, including this empire of yours. You want this empire? Fine, but the price you'll pay is that you must belong to me once again. Forever. Avery, you want this throne? Then you'll have to share it with the devil. Chapter 1. The Wolf's Trap. Manhattan never sleeps. Tonight, neon lights flickered against rain-slicked pavement, turning the city into a massive, cold, soulless circuit board. At the peak of the Vane Tower, a masquerade ball was in full swing, a place where the world's most powerful elite hid behind masks of gold and silk. Avery clutched her tiny clutch, feeling the cold bite of the encrypted USB drive hidden inside. Beneath her black lace mask, her eyes were as sharp as a cat hunting in the night. She wasn't here to dance. She was here to end the arrogance of one man. Dominic Vane. He stood at the center of the decadence, swirling a glass of amber whiskey. A steel wolf mask hugged his angular face, revealing only a cruel, mocking smirk and ash-gray eyes that could strip away any lie. He was a god of Wall Street, but also a demon of bloody acquisitions. Your drink seems a bit bland, little girl. Dominic's voice was deep, carrying the vibration of a low cello string, sending a shiver down Avery's spine. He had appeared behind her unnoticed. Avery didn't turn around. She calmly raised her champagne flute, her tone unnervingly steady. I prefer things original, Mr. Vane. Adulterations usually hide the rot within. Dominic took a step forward, closing the distance until Avery could smell sandalwood and the smoky breath of his lungs. He leaned down, whispering into her ear, his heat searing her sensitive skin, sharp. But you should be careful. Here, people don't use words to fight me. They use their lives. A sudden wave of dizziness hit her. The world began to blur, the crystal chandeliers spinning like falling stars. Damn it. That drink earlier. She had been too careless. Someone had tampered with it before she could even make her move. Avery stumbled back, her breath hitching. She needed to escape this suffocating room before she collapsed. Let go of me, she rasped as she felt a hand as firm as a vice grip her waist. You think you can run in this condition? Dominic growled. He wasn't guiding her, he was escorting her. You broke into my network, Avery. I knew exactly who you were the second you walked through that door. The heavy doors of the 88th floor penthouse swung open and slammed shut, cutting off the party's roar with a heavy, pressurized silence. Dominic threw her onto the black silk bed. Avery tried to rise, but her body was leaden. Desire and toxins were intertwining, incinerating her last shred of reason. Dominic tore off the wolf mask, tossing it onto the marble floor with a sharp metallic clang. He looked at her with the eyes of a predator who had finally cornered his prey. I am no savior, Avery. I am an owner. If you chose to enter the wolf's den, you must accept the price. That night, Manhattan was buried in a white blizzard. Outside the floor-to-ceiling windows, the world was freezing over. But inside this room, a brutal fire raged. Avery did not know then that the life beginning from this frantic collision would be the start of a new empire, or the total collapse of a dynasty. The next morning, as the first light pierced the haze, Avery vanished. She left behind an empty bed, a frozen heart, and a secret that would drive Dominic Vane to the brink of madness for the next 5 years. Chapter 2. The Great Escape. The gray dawn of New York filtered through the curtains, but the searing heat of humiliation still burned against Avery's skin. Dominic Vane was asleep, his breathing as steady as a predator temporarily sated. Avery gritted her teeth, suppressing the sharp pain racking her body as she gathered her clothes with trembling hands. She didn't take the USB drive, it was worthless now. She had traded something far more precious, her own freedom. Goodbye, devil, she whispered, her fragile silhouette vanishing into the early Manhattan mist. 3 weeks later, rain drummed incessantly against the glass of a private clinic in the suburbs. Avery stared blankly at the test results in her hand. 2 vivid red lines. A cruel irony of fate. Inside her, the blood of her enemy was taking root. Avery, they're coming. The voice of Liam, her only close friend and a dark web hacker, crackled over the phone. Dominic's men tracked your credit card signal at the pharmacy. He's closing the circle. There's no way out. Yes, there is. Avery squeezed the paper, her eyes flashing with grim determination. If I no longer exist in this world, he can never find me. That night, a tropical storm tore across the Hudson Bridge. Avery's silver sedan hurtled wildly over the slick pavement. Behind her, the headlights of pitch-black SUVs pressed closer like demonic eyes. Dominic sat in the back of the lead car, his face a mask of ice. He didn't want to kill her. He wanted to chain her to his side. Ram her off the road. Don't hurt her. Dominic barked into the radio, his voice trembling with a rare flicker of panic. But Avery didn't hit the brakes. She looked into the rearview mirror and flashed a bitter smile. She knew Dominic was watching. She wanted him to remember this moment forever. Avery jerked the steering wheel. The tires screeched violently against the asphalt. The car smashed through the guardrail, plunging straight into the churning waters below. Boom! A deafening explosion. The leaking fuel tank ignited, turning the car into a massive fireball before it was swallowed by the frigid depths. Dominic lunged out of his car, letting out a gut-wrenching roar of agony. He stood at the edge of the bridge, staring down into the black abyss where the car had vanished. Fire danced on the surface of the water, but no one emerged. Find her. Dive in. I don't care if you have to tear this river apart, find her. Dominic collapsed, his fist striking the bridge railing until it bled. For the first time in his life, the man who held the fates of thousands in his palm realized there were things money and power could never buy. The next morning, international headlines exploded. Tragic accident on Hudson Bridge. Suspect in Vane Corp document theft presumed dead. 300 miles away, at a deserted pier in New Jersey, a woman with cropped, platinum blonde hair stepped quietly onto a cargo ship bound for London. She rested a hand on her stomach, where a tiny heartbeat was beginning to pulse. "We're free," she whispered into the sea breeze. Avery hadn't just left behind a charred wreck. She had left Dominic Vane with an obsession that would haunt him for the rest of his life. A perfect death to begin a real life. Chapter 3. The Double Beat. The cabin of the cargo ship smelled of rust and salt, but for Avery, it was the scent of survival. She sat on a narrow bunk, her fingers tracing the grainy ultrasound image she had snatched from the clinic before the world went up in flames. The doctor's voice echoed in her mind. Not one heartbeat, Avery. 2. Twins. 2 legacies of a night she wanted to forget, growing inside her like a silent storm. Her thoughts drifted back to the week before the bridge. Her father, a man whose soul was mortgaged to high-interest debts, had cornered her in their decaying mansion. "You're going to marry Silas Thorne," he had hissed, his breath reeking of cheap gin. "He's 70, he's disgusting, but he's worth billions. He wants a young bride, and I want my debts cleared." When Avery told him about the pregnancy, hoping for a shred of paternal protection, his reaction was a cold, sharp slap. "You will terminate it," he commanded. "Silas won't accept another man's bastards. Especially not the bastards of a man like Dominic Vane. If Vane finds out, he'll destroy us all just to claim what's his." That was the moment Avery realized she was no longer a daughter, she was a transaction. Her family saw her womb as an obstacle, and Dominic Vane saw her as a trophy to be retrieved. "I won't let them touch you," she whispered to the shadows of the cabin, her hand shielding her stomach. She had spent her final days in New York meticulously crafting her own end. With Liam's help, she had procured a stolen car and a body from the city morgue, a Jane Doe with a similar build, unclaimed and forgotten. She had dressed the corpse in her own jewelry, her own clothes, and placed her own dental records in the glove box. The explosion on the bridge hadn't just been a distraction, it was an exorcism. She had watched from the darkness of the riverbank, shivering in the freezing water after swimming to safety, as Dominic screamed her name. She had seen the raw, primal agony on his face. For a second, her heart had faltered. But then she remembered his words, "I am an owner." She wouldn't be owned, and her children wouldn't be born into a cage of gold and blood. As the ship hit the open Atlantic, the silhouette of the New York skyline faded into a jagged line of gray. Avery took her passport, the one with the name, Elena Vance, and dropped her old ID into the churning wake of the ship. "Avery is dead," she said, her voice caught by the wind. Dominic Vane could keep his empire. Silas Thorne could keep his billions. She had something far more dangerous, a future they didn't know existed. Chapter 4. The London Escape. The foghorn wailed through the dense mist of the London docks, drowning out the horrific memories of the fire on the Hudson Bridge. Avery stepped off the gangplank, taking a deep breath of the cold air thick with the scent of coal and damp stone. New York was a past life. Here, she was no longer Avery, the commodity her father had auctioned off, nor the thief, hunted by Dominic Vane. Under her new identity, Elena Vance, she rented a small apartment above an antique shop in Notting Hill. The British capital, with its cobbled alleys and ancient libraries, was the perfect sanctuary for a ghost to hide. But Elena did not flee to wither away. With her skilled hands and an innate eye for beauty, she began to rebuild her world. She established herself as an expert in the restoration of old master paintings, a profession requiring absolute patience and the ability to conceal the fractures of time. Restoration isn't about making a painting new again, she would tell her high society clients. It's about preserving its soul while erasing the traumas left by the past. That was exactly what she was doing with her own life. Elena spent hours in her minimalist studio under warm yellow light, meticulously using a microscope and brushes as fine as a strand of hair to revive forgotten masterpieces. The work provided the silence she needed to face her nightly nightmares, the ones where Dominic's ash-gray eyes still watched her from the shadows. However, Elena's piece wasn't just filled with oil canvases. Every evening, after laying down her palette, she returned to her true happiness. In a bedroom filled with the scent of baby powder and warm milk, two tiny lives were growing. Leo, a son with a calm, stoic temperament beyond his years, and Luna, a daughter with bright, mischievous eyes that seemed to read her mother's every thought. Daily, Elena looked at her children's faces and saw reflections of that man. Leo possessed Dominic's high brow and decisiveness, while Luna inherited the lethal, charming smile she had seen on that fateful night 5 years ago. "We are safe now," she whispered, kissing the children's foreheads. Elena believed she had buried her past deep enough beneath the Hudson River. She didn't know that across the ocean, in a Manhattan skyscraper, Dominic Vane had never believed in her death. He had spent 1,825 days scouring every corner of the globe, and a predator's patience was about to be rewarded. London's largest antique art auction was approaching, and the name of the premier restorer, Elena Vance, had finally crossed the desk of Vane Corp. Chapter 5: The London Encounter. The crystal chandeliers at Christie's auction house glittered, reflecting off diamond jewelry and champagne flutes held by London's elite. Elena stood behind the velvet curtains, adjusting her forest green silk dress, modest yet clinging to her mature curves. 5 years had forged a terrified girl into a woman who radiated a cold, lethal composure. Tonight was the auction of The Lost Queen, the masterpiece she had spent 6 months restoring. "Elena, will you take the stage?" the auction director whispered. "The VIP client from New York wants to meet the restorer in person. He just bid $10 million. Elena's heart skipped a beat. The client from New York. "I don't do public appearances," she replied, her voice sharp. "Those are my rules." But her rules shattered the moment the heavy oak doors of the auditorium swung open. An invisible pressure flooded the room, turning the air thick. The whispers died instantly. Dominic Vane walked in. He was no longer the reckless hunter of 5 years ago. Today's Dominic was an emperor of the shadows, far more ruthless and powerful. His bespoke black suit accentuated his towering, predatory frame. His ash-gray eyes swept the room, cold and sharp as a blade drawn from its sheath. Elena held her breath, retreating into the shadows behind the curtain. He couldn't see her. She had died on the Hudson Bridge. She was someone else now. $15 million, Dominic's voice rang out, deep and resonant, sending a shiver through the crowd. On one condition, specialist Elena Vance must personally explain the restoration technique at my estate tonight. "Mr. Vane," the director stammered, "Miss Vance is very private." "I'm not buying the painting," Dominic cut him off, his gaze snapping directly toward the curtain where Elena stood, as if he could scent her through the fabric. "I'm buying her time." Elena clenched her fists until her knuckles turned white. He knew, in some twisted, impossible way, the monster had caught her scent. She fled the auction house through the back exit, hailing a taxi and racing toward Notting Hill. Her mind screamed only one thought: get Leo and Luna out of here now. When she reached the apartment, she found the twins sitting on the floor with a tablet. "Mom, there's a man in a black suit standing downstairs." Leo looked up, his gray eyes, identical to Dominic's, searching hers. He's been staring at our window for a long time. Elena froze. A chill raced down her spine. She moved to the window, peeling back the curtain. Under the dim London street lamps, a polished black Rolls-Royce sat silently. Dominic stood leaning against the car, smoking a cigarette, the white smoke vanishing into the night. He looked up, his ash-gray gaze locking onto hers. He didn't call the police. He didn't storm in. He simply stood there, like a wolf patiently waiting for his prey to emerge from the den. Dominic pulled out his phone, and a second later, Elena's phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number appeared. 5 years is too long for a game of hide-and-seek, Avery. I just bought this entire block. You have nowhere left to run. Chapter 6. The Bloodline Revealed. The doorbell rang. A sharp, cold, dry sound that cut through the thick atmosphere of the small apartment in Notting Hill. Avery stood frozen in the middle of the living room, her breath catching in her throat. She had prepared for this moment for 5 years, but nothing could prepare her for the reality of the monster finally laying his hand upon her door. "Mom, is that man here?" Luna whispered, her tiny hand gripping the hem of Avery's skirt. Avery took a deep breath, forcing herself to regain the composure of a restoration expert. She stepped toward the door and opened it. Dominic Vane stood there, tall and imposing, looming over the entire doorway. His scent, sandalwood mixed with the chill of the London rain, flooded the room, invading her private space. He said nothing, merely staring at her in silence, his ash-gray eyes boring into her face as if trying to strip away the Elena Vance mask she had painstakingly built. "You still look magnificent playing dead, Avery," Dominic spoke, his voice deep and dangerous, like the low growl of a black panther. "I don't know what you were talking about, Mr. Vane." "My name is Elena," she replied, her voice as cold as ice. "And this is my private residence. You are trespassing." Dominic flashed a smirk, a smile devoid of any warmth. He looked away from her and shifted his gaze inside the room. And then, he froze. Leo and Luna were standing behind the sofa. Leo stared directly at Dominic with a look of wariness, his brow furrowed with an innate authority. Luna was curious, her eyes sparkling with intelligence. Silence took hold. It was the thunderous silence before a storm breaks. Dominic stared at the two children, then back at Avery. His gaze lingered on Leo a bit longer. The boy was a perfect miniature of himself, from the high forehead to the steady, fearless gaze. "5 years," Dominic whispered, his voice now vibrating with an extreme, suppressed emotion. "You took my bloodline, fled across half the globe, and let my children grow up in a dilapidated apartment like this? They are not yours," Avery screamed, a mother's instinct surging forth. "They are mine, mine alone." Dominic stepped into the house, slamming the doors shut behind him. He approached her, each heavy footstep reclaiming every inch of ground she had stolen. He stopped only inches away, leaning down so his hot breath fanned against her face. "They have my eyes, Avery. They have my stubbornness." He raised his hand, intending to touch her face, but Avery recoiled. He pulled his hand back, his gaze turning ruthless. "I had intended to punish you for that explosion on the bridge. But now, everything has changed." He turned toward the two children, his voice suddenly becoming terrifyingly gentle. "Hello, little ones. I am Dominic, and as of today, your life of poverty officially ends. What are you going to do?" Avery trembled. Dominic turned back to look at her, his gray eyes now burning with a frenzied fire of possession. "I didn't buy this neighborhood for charity, Avery. I bought it to surround you. You have 10 minutes to pack the children's things. If not, I am taking them without you." The battle 5 years ago was merely a prologue. Now, Avery realized she was no longer facing a betrayed billionaire. She was facing a father reclaiming his throne. Chapter 7. The Golden Cage. The Rolls-Royce Phantom glided silently through the ancient streets of London, but inside the car, the tension was so thick a single spark could have caused an explosion. Avery sat in the back seat, her arms wrapped tightly around Leo and Luna. Opposite her, Dominic Vane leaned back against the leather seat, his long legs crossed with effortless authority. He didn't look at her. Instead, every few minutes, his gaze flickered toward the children with a look that was both curious and predatory. "Where are you taking us?" Avery broke the silence, her voice trembling with fury. "Home," Dominic replied curtly, his ash-gray eyes fixed on Leo, who was staring back at him with a gaze of pure, fearless defiance. "Our home is in Notting Hill. You are kidnapping us." Dominic flicked a cold smirk. "I am not kidnapping my family, Avery. I am merely relocating my assets to a more secure environment. That apartment was not fit for a vain heir to breathe in." The car pulled up in front of a classical estate secluded on the outskirts of London, surrounded by towering stone walls and a state-of-the-art security system. This wasn't a house, it was a fortress. As they entered the grand hall, Luna timidly gripped her brother's hand. Dominic signaled to the butler, "Take the children to the playroom and prepare dinner according to the highest nutritional standards. I have some private matters to discuss with their mother." "I'm not going anywhere." Leo stood in front of Avery, his voice high-pitched but steely. "You aren't our father. You're a dangerous stranger." Dominic froze. He dropped to one knee to meet the boy at eye level. For the first time, Avery saw the ruthlessness in his eyes give way to a flicker of amused intrigue. "I like your courage, kid. It's very much like my own. But here, I make the rules." He gestured for two massive bodyguards to step forward. Avery realized she couldn't fight with brute force right now. She leaned down and kissed the children's foreheads. "Go with the butler, okay? Mommy will be fine, I promise." Once the silhouettes of the children vanished up the stairs, Dominic stood up, his faux gentleness evaporating. He grabbed Avery's wrist, hauling her into the study and slamming the door shut, locking it. "Let go of me," Avery screamed, shoving against his rock-hard chest. Dominic pinned her against the oak door, his arms blocking her on both sides, trapping her in the narrow space. "In the last 5 years, what did you teach them? That their father is a monster? That I was dead? You are a monster, Dominic. You treat people like numbers on a financial report. I'd rather they grow up in poverty than become emotionless machines like you." "Too late," Dominic growled, his face so close she could feel his hot breath. "You fired the first shot of this war on that bridge, and now I'm ending it. You will stay here, in this cage, until I decide what to do with you." He let go of her, tossing a stack of documents onto the desk. "This is a marriage settlement. Sign it, and your children will have everything in the world. Refuse, and I will prove to a court that you are an unstable mother who faked her own death and kidnapped minors across borders." Avery looked at the paperwork, feeling a sense of collapse spreading through her chest. He didn't just want his bloodline, he wanted to break her will. But Dominic had forgotten one thing. Leo didn't just have his eyes. He had her genius. Upstairs, in the luxurious playroom, Leo had already opened his custom-built smartwatch. He calmly typed a line of code into the estate's Wi-Fi system. "Get ready, Luna," Leo whispered, his gray eyes flashing with mischief. "We're going to show this man what the price is for wanting to be our father." Chapter 8: The Counterattack of the Geniuses. In the ground floor study, Dominic was pouring a glass of strong liquor, his eyes fixed on Avery like a hunter savoring a trapped prey. The marriage contract lay on the table like a gold-plated life sentence. "Sign it, Avery. Don't make me resort to final measures," Dominic said coldly. But before Avery could open her mouth, a beeping sound erupted from the mansion's ceiling speakers. The crystal chandeliers suddenly flickered incessantly like a chaotic disco party. "What on earth is this?" Dominic frowned, stepping toward the smart control panel on the wall. The touchscreen, which usually displayed security schematics, now showed a cartoon image of a wolf trapped in a cage, accompanied by glowing red text, "Daddy is a loser." Thud. The entire automated curtain system slammed shut. The fire suppression mist system began to activate, turning the luxurious study into an impromptu rainstorm. "Leo!" Avery gasped, caught between surprise and amusement. She knew her son was capable of hacking mid-tier security systems, but this was the Vane Corporation's own security network. Dominic was drenched, his expensive shirt clinging to his toned physique. He angrily pressed the intercom button. "Security. Cut the power immediately." But responding to him was Luna's high-pitched voice echoing throughout the house. "Uncle Dominic, do you know about the QR code on your shirt cuff? It leads straight into your bank account. Brother Leo says you're too rich and need to share some with the stray cat shelters in London." "What?" Dominic roared. He looked down at his smartwatch. Transfer notifications were flashing continuously. £50,000, £100,000, all sent with the memo. A meeting gift from father. Avery could no longer contain herself. She burst into laughter. "I told you, they aren't ordinary children. You want to possess them? You'll have to outsmart their brains first. Dominic stood still amidst the mist in the room, his initial rage suddenly dissipating, replaced by a strange spark of pride igniting in his chest. He looked up at the surveillance camera, where Leo stood with arms crossed in the playroom, his ash-gray eyes full of defiance. Impressive, Dominic whispered, a half-smile appearing. An heir who knows how to rob his own father before he even knows how to earn. Truly the Vane style. He turned to Avery, his gaze deepening. You've raised these little monsters excellently, Avery. But this only makes me more determined to keep everyone here. I won't let my geniuses wander outside for another single day. He pulled out his phone, typing a series of manual commands to restore the system. The game is over, kid. But the reward for your intelligence will be a trip to Disneyland tomorrow morning. On the condition that your mother signs this paper. Leo replied through the loudspeaker in a firm voice. Disneyland is for babies, Uncle Dominic. We want a private lab and Mom must have freedom of movement. Otherwise, tomorrow the New York Stock Exchange will see the Vane Group sponsoring a rights organization for cockroaches. Dominic froze. He looked at Avery, then up at the ceiling. For the first time in his life, this ruthless man felt he had truly met his match, and it happened to be 5-year-old children. Chapter 9. The DNA Test. Dominic stood motionless in the center of the study, water dripping from his slicked-back hair onto the expensive Persian rug. He stared at the security monitor that had just been downed by a 5-year-old. A strange sensation, one never before found in the dictionary of a cold-blooded man like him, was rising. Pride. A private lab? Dominic repeated softly, his smirk widening. Fine, little man, the deal is set. He turned toward Avery, his gaze as sharp as a blade, appearing to strip away every secret she had buried for half a decade. You've raised them well, but don't think for a second that's enough to challenge me. Don't touch my children, Dominic, Avery said, backing away, her breath still ragged from her earlier laughter. You already have your answer. What more do you need from a piece of paper? Dominic stepped closer, pulling a sealed white envelope from the pocket of his soaked blazer. He tossed it onto the desk next to the marriage contract. The Vane bloodline does not accept ambiguity, Avery. I took hair samples from Leo and Luna the moment they stepped out of the car. He glanced at his watch. The results will be ready in 30 minutes. My private lab is already processing them. Avery felt her heart tighten. She wasn't afraid of a wrong result. She was terrified of the right one. Once that paper confirmed paternity, Dominic would have the most ultimate legal excuse to strip the children from her hands forever. You are a bastard, she hissed through gritted teeth. I am a businessman, and these are the most valuable assets I have ever owned, Dominic replied coldly. He pressed a button to call the butler. Take Ms. Vance to the master bedroom. Monitor her closely. If she takes one step out that door, you are all fired. 30 minutes later, darkness enveloped the estate, save for the dim light flickering in Dominic's study. He sat there, facing the envelope that had just been delivered by drone. His fingers trembled slightly, an unthinkable occurrence for a man who signed billion-dollar deals without blinking. He tore the envelope open. DNA test results. Sample A, Dominic Vane, and Sample B, Leo Vance, Sample C, Luna Vance. Probability of paternity, 99.99%. Dominic closed his eyes, a long breath escaping his chest. 99.99%. No longer a suspicion, no longer just a resemblance in their eyes. They were his. The little geniuses who had just crashed his system were the heirs to the Vane empire. He stood up immediately, striding upstairs. He pushed open the master bedroom door where Avery sat by the window, staring out into the London night. Congratulations, Avery, Dominic tossed the results onto her lap. You are officially the mother of the sole heirs to Vane Corp. Avery glanced at the paper, her eyes red with resentment. So what? Do you plan to keep us locked in here forever? Not just locked, Dominic leaned down, his rough hand gripping her chin, forcing her to look directly into his burning gray eyes. Tomorrow morning, my lawyers will announce the existence of the children. And you, Avery, you will walk down the aisle with me. Not as Elena Vance, but as the wife of Dominic Vane. I'd rather die. You already died once on the Hudson Bridge, Avery. Don't test my patience again, Dominic whispered, his voice hoarse with desire and possession. You can hate me, but the children need a prestigious status. And I need you to keep those little monsters in check. He turned to walk out, but before leaving, he left her with a sentence that chilled her to the bone. Get ready. My enemies have already begun to scent blood. This game is no longer just between the two of us. Chapter 10. The Shocking Declaration. The next morning, London woke up to a media earthquake. Without a grand press conference, Dominic Vane chose the most ruthless and direct way to assert his ownership. The Vane Corp homepage changed its entire interface to a single photograph, the backs of two children holding hands as they walked through the estate gardens, accompanied by a brief, golden inscription, the official heirs of the Vane Empire. In just 60 seconds, Vane Corp stocks surged by 15%. The financial world was stunned. The Diamond Bachelor, the heartless demon of Wall Street, had children, and not just one, but two. Inside the estate, Avery threw the newspaper to the floor. She wore the luxurious white silk dress Dominic had prepared, but it felt more like a shroud for her freedom. "You're insane," she said, looking at Dominic as he nonchalantly straightened his tie in the mirror. "You've just turned the children into targets for every assassin and competitor in the world." Dominic turned, his expression cold and unruffled. "They were targets the moment they carried my blood, Avery. The only way to protect them is to place them at the highest peak, where no one can touch them." He stepped closer, pinning a diamond brooch to her chest. "And you as well. Today, we return to New York. The private jet is waiting." At JFK Airport, the appearance of Dominic Vane alongside a woman who had died 5 years ago and two children who were his spitting image created a scene of total chaos. Crowds of reporters were held back by a thick wall of security guards. But within that crowd, there were eyes that held no admiration. In a hidden corner of the VIP lounge, Avery's father, Silas, stood with a pale face and bloodshot eyes from debt. Beside him stood men in black suits with sinister smiles. "She's still alive. That bitch is still alive," Silas muttered, his hands trembling. "And she had children with Dominic Vane. That money, that fortune must belong to our family." That evening, at a penthouse in central Manhattan, Leo and Luna showed no fear of the extravagant luxury. Leo was busy examining his father's new firewall system, while Luna experimented with expensive perfumes on the vanity. "Mommy," Luna ran to Avery, whispering, "Mr. Dominic just gave me a black card. He said I can buy an island if I want. Should I hack it?" Before Avery could answer, the doorbell rang. It wasn't a polite ring, but a frantic, desperate pounding. Dominic stepped out from the library, his face darkening. He opened the door, and Silas burst in, his breath reeking of alcohol. "Avery, my beloved daughter," he wailed, trying to lung toward her but being blocked by Dominic's guards. "Dominic, you can't hide her forever. She is my daughter, and those two children are my grandchildren. I have the right to share this wealth." Dominic stepped forward, completely shielding Avery and the two children behind him. He looked at Silas as if looking at a filthy virus. "Silas," Dominic said, his voice so low and cold it made the listener shiver. "5 years ago, you sold her once. Tonight, if you dare take one more step, I will make your name disappear from every map in this world. Get out. You can't. I'll sue. I'll tell the world you're holding my daughter captive." Dominic smirked, a diabolical grin. He pulled out his phone and pressed a button. Immediately, the large TV screen in the room displayed a list of Silas's massive gambling debts and evidence of his embezzlement over the past 5 years. "The police are waiting for you in the lobby, father-in-law," Dominic whispered. "I've bought up all your debt. Now, you haven't just lost your daughter, you owe me your very life." Avery watched her father's figure being dragged away in humiliation. She felt no pity, only a new kind of terror. Dominic Vane wasn't just protecting her. He was clearing every obstacle to make her an exclusive toy in his kingdom. He turned back to Avery, his gray eyes burning with the fire of possession. "The first enemy has been eliminated. Now, Avery, shouldn't we discuss our official wedding?" Chapter 11. Enemies Revealed. Manhattan was submerged in a thunderstorm, lightning slashing across the night sky like a herald for an impending purge. While Dominic was occupied with lawyers preparing for the wedding of the century, a devious alliance was forming in a secret wine cellar on the south side of the city. Julian Vane, Dominic's half-brother, sat swirling a glass of red wine, his eyes gleaming with poisonous envy. Unlike Dominic's cold, commanding aura, Julian exuded the air of a profligate playboy, but he carried the heart of a venomous snake. "Mr. Silas, you look more pathetic than I imagined," Julian smirked, looking at the man he had just bailed out of the police station using a few legal loopholes. Silas gritted his teeth, the bruises on his face from the previous night's scuffle still aching. That bastard Dominic, he dared to throw me in jail. He stole my daughter, and he stole my billion-dollar grandchildren. Let's correct that, Julian interrupted, his voice razor sharp. My brother didn't steal them. He possesses them. And as long as Avery and those 2 children are by Dominic's side, you will never touch a single cent of that fortune. On the contrary, Dominic will crush you until you are nothing but a pile of ash. Silas trembled. What do you want? Why did you save me? Julian stood up, walking toward a digital map of Vane Corp displayed on a large screen. I want to topple my brother's throne. Dominic is too strong, but now he has a weakness. That weakness is Avery, and those 2 little seeds. He pulled out a confidential file. Does your family still have the original papers from the sale of Avery years ago? We won't sue for kidnapping. We'll sue for guardianship. If we can prove Dominic used force to claim Avery from the start, and that this marriage is a form of coercion, I can incite the board of directors to oust him over a moral scandal. But Dominic has evidence of my crimes. Silas said fearfully. I will wipe them clean, Julian laughed coldly. In exchange, you must convince Avery to betray him. Use emotion, use her hatred for Dominic. All she needs to do is sign a statement accusing Dominic of abuse, and his empire will crumble. At the same time, at the penthouse, Avery stood on the balcony, letting the freezing rain pelt her face. She felt like a bird that had escaped one iron cage only to fall into a gilded one. A warm, solid hand suddenly wrapped around her waist from behind. Dominic pressed his chest against her back, his breath smelling of expensive tobacco. The rain is cold, go inside, Dominic whispered, his voice slightly hoarse. Are you protecting me, or are you guarding me? Avery didn't turn around, her voice weary. Both. Dominic turned her around, forcing her to look into his eyes. My enemies are starting to align with the cowards in your family. Julian is making his move. I know every step they take. He reached out to gently stroke a wet lock of her hair. Don't listen to a word from your father. If you betray me, not only do I fall, but the children will become tools in Julian's hands. You know how ruthless he is. Avery shuddered. She looked into the ash-gray eyes of the man before her. Dominic was brutal, but he was transparent. Julian and her father, they were the knives hidden in sleeves. I'm not on anyone's side, Dominic, she replied coldly. I'm only on the side of my children. Dominic tightened his grip, pulling her into a possessive and forceful kiss. Good. Just remember that. In this Manhattan, only I have the power to keep you and the children alive. Midst the storm howling outside, the war for the throne had officially stepped into the light. The enemies were no longer hiding in the shadows, and Avery realized she was the decisive pawn for whoever could hold her heart, or her fear. Next step. Would you like me to move to Chapter 12, the betrayal attempt, where Julian contacts Avery in secret to offer her a way out?
What do you think Dominic will do when he finds out his son hacked his entire bank account just to save stray cats? Leave your comments below. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you don't miss the vain father and son's battle of wits in the upcoming episodes.